I should have counted the doors on that floor the first night I moved in. 4 apartments. 4 doors. That's what the floor plan said. That's what the landlord told me. But by the 3rd week, when I stood in that hallway at 3:14 in the morning, I counted 5, and the 5th one was breathing. Chapter 1. The door that was never there. Marcus Webb hated the graveyard shift, but he loved the silence. 28 years old, broad-shouldered, the kind of tired that lived behind his eyes and never fully left. He worked nights as a security guard at a downtown Chicago office tower, the kind of building where the elevators hummed louder than the people. He'd moved into the Ashford building 3 weeks ago, an old pre-war apartment complex on the north side, red brick gone the color of dried blood, radiators that clanked like something trying to get out of the walls. He liked it there. It was cheap. It was quiet. Nobody bothered him. His apartment was 4C, 3rd door on the left, 4th floor. He knew that hallway the way you know the back of your own hand. The water stain shaped like Florida on the ceiling, the flickering sconce outside 4B, the smell of old wood polish that never quite faded, no matter how many decades passed. 4 doors. 4A, 4B, 4C, 4D. That was the floor. That had always been the floor. The first night it happened, Marcus came home from his shift a little after 2 in the morning. Chicago was doing that thing it does in late October, where the wind comes off the lake and finds every gap in your coat. He was cold, and he was tired, and he almost didn't notice. Almost. But when he stepped off the elevator, the hallway felt wrong. Not different. Wrong. The kind of wrong your body catches before your mind does. He stood there for a second, keys already in his hand, and he counted without meaning to. 4A, 4B, 4C, and then, between 4C and 4D, where the wall should have been, a door. Old wood. Dark, almost black, like it had been stained with something other than paint. No number on it. No peephole. Just a brass handle, tarnished green at the edges, and 3 deep scratches running diagonally across the lower panel, like something had tried to claw its way either in or out. Marcus stood in the hallway a long time, staring at it. He told himself it was a maintenance closet. Buildings this old had those. Odd little doors that led to pipes and fuse boxes and nothing interesting at all. He told himself that, and he almost believed it. And he went inside his apartment and locked the door and did not sleep. The next morning, the door was gone. Not closed. Not painted over. Gone. Smooth plaster wall between 4C and 4D. The same faded wallpaper pattern running unbroken from one end to the other, like it had always been that way. Marcus stood in that spot for almost 10 minutes before work, running his hand along the wall, half expecting his fingers to sink through it. They didn't. He told himself he'd imagined it. 3 years on night shifts will do that to a person. The sleep deprivation, the isolation, the way your brain starts inventing things in the gray hours before dawn just to keep itself company. He almost convinced himself. Almost. Then, 2 nights later, it came back. This time, it was different. The wood was lighter. The scratches were gone. And from behind it, faint, but unmistakable, Marcus heard footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Someone pacing, back and forth, like they were waiting for something. He pressed his ear to the door before his brain could tell him not to. The footsteps stopped. Silence pooled into the hallway so completely that Marcus could hear his own pulse in his ears. And then, so quiet he thought at first he'd imagined it. A voice. A child's voice. Humming a tune he almost recognized. 3 notes that curled up at the end like a question. He backed away so fast, he nearly fell over his own feet. That was the night he stopped believing it was nothing. Over the next 2 weeks, the door became a fixture of his nights, appearing, vanishing, appearing again, never on a schedule he could predict. Some nights it wasn't there at all, and he'd stand in the hallway feeling almost disappointed, which frightened him more than the door itself ever had. Other nights, it changed. Once, the wood had turned pale, almost bone white, and warm to the touch, like it had a pulse under the grain. Once, there were fresh scratches, wet and dark, dripping down onto the hallway carpet. Except when he crouched to look closer, there was nothing there. No stain, no mark, nothing but old carpet fibers, dry as ash. The sounds changed, too. Footsteps, most nights. Sometimes whispering, too low to make out words, like a conversation happening in the room, next to a room, next to a room. Once, unmistakably, someone crying. A woman, muffled, like she had her face pressed into a pillow. And once, the worst night, children laughing. Not one child. Several. The kind of laughter that echoes wrong in an empty building, that has no business existing behind a door in a hallway that officially did not have 5 apartments on it. He knocked exactly once. He never did it again. The wood had gone cold and slick under his knuckles, and something on the other side had knocked back 3 times, slow, deliberate, matching his own hand exactly, half a second behind, like an echo that had learned to think for itself. Marcus wasn't a man who scared easily. 4 years in the army before this job had burned most of the ordinary fear out of him. But there is a particular kind of fear that has nothing to do with danger and everything to do with wrongness, and that was the fear that had moved into his chest and set up residence. So he did what anyone in his position would do. He started looking for answers. The building super, a heavy-set man named Dale, who smelled permanently of cigarettes, and WD-40, laughed him off the first time he asked. "Ashford's only got 4 units of floor, man. Always has. You can check the blueprints if you want, they're in the office." Marcus checked the blueprints. 4 units of floor. 4 A through 4D. No 5th door. No gap in the wall where one could have been. But blueprints don't account for buildings that have been standing since 1911, through 2 fires, 1 partial collapse in the 1960s, and God knew how many renovations since. Marcus started digging through the Chicago Public Library archive on his days off, scrolling through microfiche until his eyes burned, looking for anything on the Ashford building's history. He found it on his 4th visit, a newspaper clipping from 1963. 3 tenants vanish from North Side apartment building, the headline read. No bodies, no suspects, no explanation. Just 3 names, a mother and 2 children, who had lived on the 4th floor and simply stopped existing one October night. Their apartment found locked from the inside, their belongings untouched, dinner still cold on the table. Their apartment number, according to the article, had been 4. Marcus read that number 4 times before it fully landed. There was no 4E. There had never been a 4E. Every tenant he'd asked, every lease he'd seen, every blueprint on file said the same thing. 4 units, A through D. But someone, 63 years ago, had lived and vanished from an apartment that officially did not exist. He printed the article with shaking hands and went home to a building that suddenly felt much larger on the inside than it looked from the street. He asked around his floor after that. Mrs. Halloran in 4A, 81 years old, sharp as a tack, had lived in the building for 30 years. She looked at him blankly when he mentioned the 5th door. "There's no such thing, dear. 4 apartments. Always been 4. He showed her the article. She read it, frowned, and handed it back. "I don't know what this is," she said, "but I've never heard those names in my life. And I'd remember something like that happening on my own floor." Something in her voice cracked, just slightly, on the word remember, like she was reaching for a memory that wasn't answering back. Marcus went to 4B next, a young couple who'd moved in around the same time he had. Same answer. Same blank, faintly troubled look, like he was asking them to recall a dream they'd already half forgotten. Nobody remembered. Nobody but him. That was the moment the fear changed shape. It stopped being about the door. It became about him. Reality, after that, began to slip. He came home one Tuesday to find a photograph tucked half under his door. Old, sepia-toned, the edges burned in a curling brown ring like it had been pulled from a fire before it finished. A woman and 2 children standing in a doorway. The same doorway. He recognized the brass handle, the diagonal scratches, even though the picture had to be 60 years old. The woman's face had been scratched out. Not torn. Scratched. Deep gouges through the photo paper. Done by hand. Done with intent. The children's faces were untouched. They were smiling. He never saw who left it. Days began to blur after that. He'd clock into his security job at midnight, and the sun would be up before he registered more than an hour passing. He'd wake in his apartment fully dressed, shoes still on, with no memory of coming home. Twice he found himself standing in the 5th-floor hallway, a floor he had no business being on, with absolutely no memory of the elevator ride up. Once, Dale the super swore up and down that Marcus had asked him about a missing door 3 separate times that same week. Marcus only remembered asking once. His neighbors started acting strange around him, polite but distant, the way people are around someone they've decided is unwell. He heard Mrs. Halloran on the phone through her door one night, voice hushed. "The boy in 4C. I think something's wrong with him. He keeps asking about a door that isn't there. A door that isn't there." But she'd seen him standing in front of it once. He was sure of it. He remembered her face, remembered the fear in it. Now she remembered nothing at all. He started to wonder if he was losing his mind. He started to wonder, worse, if that was exactly what something wanted him to think. The night everything changed, Marcus didn't go looking for the door. The door came looking for him. He woke at 3:14 a.m. He'd remember that number for the rest of his life, to the sound of humming outside his apartment. The same 3 notes, rising at the end like a question. He opened his door, and the hallway had transformed. The 5th door stood directly across from his own. Wide open and warm golden light spilled from it into the hall. The kind of light you'd see from a home in the 1960s. A kitchen light. A family light. And standing in that doorway was a woman in a pale blue house dress, her face turned just slightly away from him, one hand extended toward 2 children standing behind her, both of them smiling at Marcus with an unnerving, patient stillness. "You found us," the woman said, her voice layered strangely, like 2 voices speaking a half-second apart. "Finally. Someone found us." Marcus's whole body screamed at him to run. He didn't. "Who are you?" he managed. "We lived here," she said. "Before they took the door away. Before everyone forgot. You remember us, don't you? You're the only one who remembers." And that was when Marcus understood. Too late. The way understanding always arrives too late in stories like this one. Exactly what the door was. And exactly what it wanted from him. It wasn't a door to a room. It never had been. It was a door to a memory the building itself had swallowed. A tragedy so complete, so violently erased, that it had carved a wound into the structure that never fully healed. The mother and her children hadn't vanished in 1963. They had been taken by something that lived in the walls long before the Ashford building had a name. Something that fed not on flesh, but on being remembered. And when it finished with them, it didn't just take their lives. It took the memory of their lives from everyone who had ever known them, erasing them so completely that even the building's own bones forgot they had existed. Everyone forgot. Everyone, except whoever the door chose next. Marcus was being chosen. Every night he'd stood in that hallway, every time he'd heard the footsteps, the crying, the laughter. The door hadn't been trying to scare him away. It had been trying to make him remember, because remembering was the only door back for the woman and her children, and the only way for that thing that fed on, forgetting to finally have him instead. "You have to let us in," the woman said, and her smile did not match the desperation cracking through her doubled voice. "Just for a moment. Just remember us completely, and we can rest. Please. We've been so cold." Behind her, one of the children stopped smiling, just for an instant. Just long enough for Marcus to see something underneath the child's face that was not a child at all. Something ancient and patient and starving, wearing a little boy's features like a coat 2 sizes too small. Marcus slammed his apartment door and threw every lock he owned. It didn't stop the humming. It didn't stop the small, polite knock that came 30 seconds later. 3 times. Slow. The same rhythm as before. The same rhythm that had answered his own hand weeks earlier. "Marcus," the woman's voice said through the wood, gentle as a lullaby. "You already remember us. You can't unremember now. That's not how this works. That's never been how this works." He backed away until he hit the far wall of his apartment, staring at his own front door like it might buckle inward at any second. It didn't. The knocking stopped. The humming faded. And in the silence that followed, worse than any sound that had come before it, Marcus understood the final, terrible truth of what was happening to him. He wasn't being hunted. He was being harvested, one memory at a time, one sleepless night at a time, until there was enough of him remembering them that the exchange could finally complete. And once it did, once he remembered completely, he wouldn't disappear the way they had. He would simply become the next name nobody remembered, the next tenant of apartment 4E, the next voice humming 3 notes behind a door that shouldn't exist, waiting for the next lonely, sleepless person to notice it. He thought about running. He thought about calling the police, calling his sister in Milwaukee, calling anyone who might believe him. He knew, with a certainty that settled into his bones like cold water, that it wouldn't matter. The building would forget he ever called. The world would forget he ever existed, the same way it had forgotten a mother and 2 children on an October night 63 years ago. There was only one thing he could think to do. At 4:44 a.m., Marcus Webb walked back out into the hallway. The 5th door was there, ajar, gold light bleeding out from the crack. He did not run from it. He walked toward it, slow, deliberate, the way you walk toward something you have finally, fully decided. "I remember you," he said, and his voice did not shake. "All 3 of you. I remember your names from the article. I remember your faces from the photograph. I won't forget you. I promise. But I'm not going in there." The humming stopped. "You don't have a choice," the woman's doubled voice said, no longer gentle. "Maybe not," Marcus said. But you need me to remember willingly, don't you? That's why it's taken weeks. That's why you've been so patient. If you could just take me, you already would have. Silence. The gold light flickered just once, like something behind it had hesitated. So here's what I'm going to do, Marcus said, and his hands were shaking now, badly, but his voice held. I'm going to remember you, every day for the rest of my life. I'm going to tell people about you until somebody besides me believes it. But I am never walking through that door. And a memory that refuses to feed you, that's not a gift. That's a debt you can never collect. For a long moment, nothing happened at all. Then the golden light guttered out like a snuffed candle, and the door slammed shut with a sound that Marcus felt in his teeth. And when the hallway lights flickered back on a second later, there was nothing there at all. Just smooth plaster, just old wallpaper, unbroken from 4C to 4D. 4 doors. There had only ever been 4 doors. Marcus moved out 3 days later. He never told Dale why. He never told Mrs. Halloran, who smiled at him blankly on his way out, already forgetting his name the way she'd forgotten everything else about that floor. He kept the newspaper clipping. He kept the burned photograph, the woman's scratched-out face, the 2 smiling children. He framed them, and he hung them in his new apartment. And every night before he sleeps, he reads their names out loud, once, so that somewhere, in whatever remains of them, they know that at least one person in the world has not let them go. He tells himself that's enough, that remembering on his own terms was a kind of victory. But some nights, very late, when the traffic outside his new building finally goes quiet, he swears he can still hear it. 3 notes, humming, rising at the end, like a question, coming from somewhere just behind the wall, beside his bed. And every time, without fail, when he gets up to check, there is no door there at all. Which is exactly what worries him most.